I guess we're live now. Welcome to our Google Hangouts. Today we actually kept it open so anyone can join, anyone interested in our topic today, which is the importance of unbiased information while you're pregnant, more commonly known as prenatal or antenatal courses or education. It's very common that the antenatal or prenatal courses are offered by the hospitals, even by private clinics. It can be private or public hospitals. And we're going to talk about what you sort of have to think about when education like this takes place. Where does the information come from? Is it designed by the hospital? What's the real purpose? Annerley has a long history of helping people to educate themselves during the pregnancy, and we've taken pride in trying to keep it always research-based information. We use international guidelines, and we try to give people as much detail as they need in order to make choices for themselves. So, Hulda, you have more experience in this than I do, and you're a midwife. I'm obviously not. So what is it that people sort of have to look out for? Let's say scenario one, pregnant, expecting couple going through a public system. Wouldn't they just assume that all the information that they're giving are, perfectly suitable for their care? Is there a reason to sort of second or doubt the education that is given there?
No, not really.
No. But what sort of questions would you give people to ask themselves?
Well, people, when they're pregnant, moms to be are pregnant, particularly with a fast baby. Yeah. They are hungry for information.
Yeah.
And they usually will sign up for some kind of antenatal classes without necessarily thinking that the details of what's going to be in those same classes, they haven't necessarily got those details. And I think perhaps convenience and possibly recommendations from others, this helps them to decide where to go for their antenatal classes.
Mm-hmm.
And much of what's being said in most classes is usually both the truth and useful information. There is an agenda in some of them, and I think we all have. Whoever is teaching a class will have to be incredibly professional to not let their own views come through in the education material. And unfortunately, with many hospitals, clinics, and places where you might take classes, you find that the information, yes, is directed towards a certain goal, I guess, or to recommend certain types of care that aren't always unbiased.
Yeah, because it must be sort of convenient for the hospital that you are you go down what they sort of recommend. Like, it's not easy for the hospital staff for someone to give birth on the floor, for example, right? They'd much rather prefer that you give birth on a bed where they can stand up and, right? Am I right?
Yeah, well, when I remember from working in hospital, which was mostly was 14 years ago, when it's a busy ward with more than perhaps one person in labor you have to take care of. Of course, if you work full time and you are catching babies, taking care of mothers, the situation which you work in is physically is often something you need to take into account. I think for most midwives and doctors in nowadays, they're perhaps involved in somewhere between 10 and 30, 40 births a month. And they don't normally sit by the person the whole time through, or stand by, or crawl on the floor, or whatever, when the baby's about to be coming out. So they have a chance to sit down here and there and move.
But if you have 20 women in labor and they're all squatting,
I guess at some point you could use that as an argument. But we kind of drifted a bit. But in the education, in the antenatal education, the hidden agenda can sometimes be when you're trying to direct people to have a certain type of birth. For example, I have friends who are anaesthetists, and they are really nice people, very good doctors, and perfect anaesthetists. They do a great job of helping people who need pain relief. And in their mind, having a birth without an epidural, for example, is almost unacceptable. Almost like if you're not offering that as a hospital or as an institution, you're giving not the best choices. And it should be every birth. It's almost like a slogan: every birth with at least an option for an epidural, and certainly recommend it. And then there are other people who are very strict on the other side. They would say, well, some more midwives, I would say, than doctors, and they would say, well, you should. The more you push and offer, the more it's going to be obviously used, and often unnecessarily.
But if we're sort of, okay, we are sort of in the public system now, right? I mean, is there let's just try to keep it simple so we don't keep it too long. Yeah. Would you say that it's worth sort of, I wouldn't say questioning the antenatal education. I mean, would you recommend that people would just try to still foresee themselves in their giving birth or staying there prenatal, postnatal? I mean, some people have to stay a bit longer. That they try to just get the most out of the care. Even I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but do you know what I mean? I mean, will the hospitals try to teach you how to do it for their conveniency?
Not 100%, no. But there will always be, in any antenatal education program, there will always be a certain way of doing things, the way that has perhaps been used for a long time. And for example, I can say that sometimes the people who teach the antenatal classes, they're teaching them the way they were set up, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. They're often people who are not on the floor, so to speak. They're not the ones that are actually in the delivery room or in the labor room. So they don't always have 100% updated version of what exactly is allowed and what can be offered to the moms. So often in antenatal education classes, there's often not necessarily the reason to try and restrict people for any kind of, financial purposes or clinical purposes or anything like that. But there is often, they just don't know any better. And then rules are always the simplest way to say, no, you can not move this way, or your partner cannot do that, or no, you're not allowed to eat. And much of this nowadays, if you are, for example, taking antenatal classes that has these kind of rules, I would sit down and sort of start to maybe not question it all, but at least have a bit of a dialogue with the teacher to say, okay, how come I cannot move from my back to the side in bed? I don't understand. And like in any decent journalism almost, instead of stopping with the answer of, well, you have to be monitored, which is the most common answer, we've already discussed it, then it's, well, that's not an answer. Thank you, but I can still move with the monitor on. But for a lot of people, this is exactly why they don't even dare to move any further in labor. And certainly while they're still in the antenatal classes and pregnant, they don't take the discussion further than this. So when there's a rule thrown out like that in the antenatal class, then I would, especially if you've paid for these classes and you're spending all this time on it, I would always ask, well, does that make any sense?
But unlikely, right? Most public systems will offer this for free. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they'll offer it, but you're spending time on it, and you've paid your taxes, so essentially you've paid for it.
That's right.
It should be good care, and as I said, I often find that teachers haven't necessarily any personal agenda for saying, oh, we can't do this or that. Again, reflecting back on when I used to work in a hospital, where most of the day was spent with someone in labor, usually being the one that catches the baby, helps the baby to the mom to get the baby as soon as it's born. Of course, if you imagine, if you have to deliver a baby from this position, okay, a person is on her knees or she's on the bed. So I can stay like that. I'm quite young and fit and healthy. I can do that for 10 minutes, all enough for an hour. Mm-hmm. But if I had to do this 10 times in the same day, and if I was even more overweight than I am, and if I was a little bit more stiff, it would be hard. But then I would say to that person, listen, sorry darling, but I actually cannot do this physically, so either I've got to get another midwife, or can we just try and move it, shift it a little bit for a while? Mm-hmm. You know, it's easy enough. Any person in labor who at least likes her midwife or doctor will probably say, yeah, no problem, I'll try this. Or, no, the baby's coming out, you do as I told you. And then I would think, of course I do. But when you're teaching the antenatal classes, if you're the person who is in the antenatal class, or if you're the teacher, you have absolutely no right to throw out kind of rules like this, unless they have a clinical reason, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say the quality of the education and the reason for why you need unbiased education, good classes, is because you want to be able to have this kind of dialogue so that the information you get, you can take them further as you're in labor. It's not just a rule that you learned.
Exactly. But this was public. Let's talk a little bit about private. I mean, let's say I own a hospital, right? And if I were to design the education, I would definitely try to, well, what I think people would do. I mean, they try to sort of have all the clients pay attention to the products that are on my shelf, you know, in my hospital shop, mm-hmm. which would be interventions mostly, right?
Not necessarily interventions. Convenience is often.
Convenience, whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, surely if 100 people are going through my hospital,
yeah,
and the midwife teaching the classes, or the doctor teaching the classes, because sometimes there are doctors teaching the classes.
Yeah.
The doctor or the midwife would say, I would absolutely try to avoid the epidural because of the risk factors. You know, I guess as an owner of the hospital, I would probably say, hey, why don't you try to sell more epidurals?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how structured it all is, and the politics and whose benefits it is. Bottom line is, a scheduled vaginal birth or a scheduled cesarean is always going to be more convenient, usually more income or more economically easy for those that are benefiting from it.
Yeah.
And sometimes to the user, it's usually it can also be a more attractive option. So for many of the hospital planners, or those that are setting up hospitals, they obviously take this into account. They try and find a way. They also obviously want a happy consumer, right? They want the person to walk out and they're happy with their baby. So you have to. It has to be packaged in a certain way so that everybody's that happy. And again, I don't think they would get away with it in an antenatal class if parents were actually to ask these questions.
Yes. So, but would you say that antenatal courses taking place within a private hospital are more or less likely to be unbiased? You know, just look at the whole globe here. I mean, the C-section rate in the States is probably 35%, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, they're never going to be 100% unbiased. I think antenatal classes in the taking place in the same institution as the birth is going to happen. The question is going to be, if I was running a maternity home, if I had my own little birth center, I would not be advocating something that is not a common practice in my own birth home, right? So as a consumer, ask yourself, okay, what are you looking for? If you're looking for, in typical, like the Dublin model of care, active management of labor, induction, the labor takes a certain amount of time, epidural is given, baby's born.
I'm not sure people know what that is.
Okay, but let's say they were. Yeah. Let's say we get somebody.
Yeah, but the question is,
yeah,
do you think if you own a clinic like midwives clinic in a city where you would have public care versus private,
yeah,
where would be the best place? Or I mean, would you recommend people to take their antenatal courses within the private hospital or in a more unbiased settings?
In the place that will give you the access to information of the type of birth you're looking for. That's what I mean with the double. Well, with anything, like if you're gonna go and give birth in a hospital that has, say, 60% C-section rate, of course you do not do antenatal classes in that same hospital. Yeah. If you want to, not a C-section.
But do people ask these questions? That's the question.
No, because they don't know. That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah. but I guess if you're in a hospital, whether it's public or private,
yeah,
private systems often are starved, right?
Yeah.
The best teachers are not there. The best quality of education is not in the public system, right? But yet you can utilize the public system in any country, I guess, at least in many countries, if you have good, solid education to get you through it, right? Same in a private settings. If you have, even if you are within a hospital with high C-section rates,
yeah,
you can sort of fight it. If you, I wouldn't say fight it, but you're more likely to get good results if you are equipped with good education from the resources that are can support what you want or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes. But I would not necessarily agree to that the public system is starved of good education people or teachers, because I would happily have argued that where I used to work in the public system, there was very, very good quality of teaching. But not everywhere in the world this is going to be like that. Overall. Yeah, I would just say likely. If you have access to, if all you're asking for is access to information about birth, then you can go to a lot of places. But if you're actually trying to achieve certain goals, then look at the institution you're about to go and to have classes with, and look at what are the typical outcomes of that place, right?
Yeah.
And if the outcomes of a place, when I saw someone last week and said, okay, I'm going to have a natural birth in this place, and I said, okay, and how are you going to do that? And I said, oh, I'm with this really nice doctor, and I've got this setup, and I said, okay, well, and this doctor supports that. I said, yeah, well, normally it doesn't do any natural births, but it's happy to do it for me. And the same in the hospital. They said, oh, they were very, very pleased. We never have a natural birth, so we're going to do it. So well, how on earth are you going to achieve those goals if people will never do it? And the antenatal classes only teach us exactly how you should do the opposite. So of course, yes, if you want to get a certain type of birth, look at the classes and education that is being that the institution you're going to take it with is known for, right? So, like for example, I teach antenatal classes. I have 3 types of classes, and if the person wants to have, she's pregnant with twins and has certain conditions, I would never tell her, oh, you're going to the natural birth, this type of classes. I'd say, well, you go to tailor-made classes for a natural birth of twins. Why are you otherwise doing it? It's never going to be the outcome you want, right?
Yes, I presume so, but it sounds like it's just an exception from the rule, that there's this one here and there who should go somewhere else. But from what you see, I guess it's not it's just that not that one. I mean, it's much more common, I believe, that people have special wishes. It's not the exception.
And I agree with it.
Yeah.
I agree with it. I just think
so it's more the bulk of people. I mean, I don't think, because when people come to us, I don't think I see like 70 or 80% of them wanting a C-section.
No.
Even if, but in some of the countries that we see, the C-section rate can be 70, 80%.
Yep.
Like in the private system. So, but I don't see them coming and saying, I want a C-section.
Yeah. Well,
but I think they hope for something else. But because of the education and sort of how everyone, like in the private sector, they sort of just squeeze them down this particular lane for their conveniency and education, and the whole lot sort of makes them go there. So to me, it doesn't sound like it's just one here and there. I think it's very, very too common.
Of course, but you have to ask yourself, okay, if somebody is disguising that, how the classes are going to be, that would be very wrong, right?
Yes.
But if you're the consumer and you've decided, okay, I'm going to do my antenatal classes, I want this and this and that, you should ask yourself prior to going in, what are these classes known for, and what's this institution standing for, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I went to a hotel in one Asian country the other day, and they were offering me to stay there for free, and certain sort of perks with it. And all I had to do is I had to listen to some kind of description of what their services and what their flats were about. No obligation to buy, no obligation to. So I'm like, oh, okay, wait, I should sit down in this, listen to it. And was I expecting when I sat down that I would just have to listen to it and then walk out? Of course not. I was being squeezed down a channel in a certain way. For a long time I had to say, but I'm not, okay, thank you, no, thank you. At the end of it, you realize, okay, why on earth did I even sit down? I knew right from the beginning that this was the purpose of this talk.
Yeah.
So you're right. When you go to a private hospital, the C-section rate is 60-70%. Of course, they're going to be channeling you in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. So wouldn't you be better off taking your antenatal care elsewhere?
Yes, if you have not that same goal. Yes, of course.
Yeah. But what are the odds that? I mean, it's very clear if you want the C-section, right? Yeah. And then you should go to C-section class.
Yes.
I
think we're debating this. We are not debating. We have the same reason to. We have the same opinion in this. I think what I'm trying to do is I'm saying, look, the responsibility is with the user. The user, before just signing up to something, any antenatal classes, they should sit down and ask themselves. It's not just a nice midwife or a nice doctor or whatever is going to teach you. The material does matter, and yes, is there an agenda? And there, like
is there someone else's agenda?
Yes.
I think that's the bottom line here.
If you have the opinion that every woman should have drugs through her labor, not just those that choose to after having all the information available, right?
Yeah.
How are you ever going to be really able to fully support them if anything else when you're teaching the classes?
Exactly. And if your boss, who is the guy who owns the hospital, wants more revenue from you, that can also be an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, same, like, if you have to ask yourself, is this hospital, for example, demanding the doctors to bring in their clients so the beds are not empty?
Yeah.
Overnight?
Well, what is it called? Is
there like a booking policy?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Will I lose my bed if I don't agree to go in for an induction? you know, things like that.
Yeah.
But that's another subject.
That's another subject. But I think, and this is taking it further. If you really want something out of your antenatal education, you go this far in the discussion.
Yeah.
You don't spend 9 months being pregnant, 5 weeks every week going to antenatal classes, hours and hours reading materials, to then realize when you're 39.5 weeks pregnant that your doctor only ever does inductions. And nobody ever spoke about this in your antenatal classes, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be able to have information that go all the way, and you can discuss it back and forth, and nothing's going to be totally new to you at the last minute. So what's the point of doing education if you learn it at the last minute? No. But in your case, it's all wrong.
I'm just scribbling on your face.
Okay, anyway, in teaching antenatal classes, I find it very, very important for everyone to be able to have unbiased
information.
Yeah.
See what we can do.
Okay, so somebody's asking us, everybody's asleep. Why are you guys online? Okay, well, of course,
we are in Hong Kong. And if you're in the States, you're very unlikely to be awake. But it's fine, because this chat is going to be available for a very long time, so you can watch it anytime. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.